Hey, everybody. Happy Friday. Thanks for starting your weekend with us at Bookish. As you know, we're the virtual program on authors, thinkers, and the literary life produced by the Southern California News Group in association with the Bay Area News Group. And I'm Sam Dunn, the senior editor of premium content here. And before we get rolling, I want to say thank you to all of our Reader Rewards subscribers, and really to all of you who come back month after month to support our programs. And hey, if you are a Reader Rewards member attending tonight, you are automatically entered to win a $50 gift certificate from our partner and one of our favorite independent bookstores in the Los Angeles area, Once Upon a Time Bookstore in Montrose. And if you're not a subscriber yet, well, why aren't you a subscriber yet? Please go to scng.com/subscribe to find your local paper and join us as a subscriber. And also, before we get going tonight, just a reminder that if you're in the audience and you've got questions, please use the Q&A section on your toolbar. And if you just want to connect with audience members or give a shout out, use the chat feature found there as well. And also, don't worry if you miss anything today, because a recording of the show will be sent to you so you can revisit some of your favorite moments or share it with others. Also, it's posted at scng.com/virtual events, and that's where you can find all of our past virtual shows, as well as see what's coming up. And now let's bring on our beloved host, Sandra Singlo. You've heard her as a regular commentator on NPR's Morning Edition in This American Life and Marketplace. She also hosts the syndicated Radio Minute, the Lowdown on Science. She's a contributing editor at The Atlantic. And wait, there's more. She's also the author of 7 books, including Mad Women and The Roomba. And she's been crazy busy with her phenomenal new show, Mad Women of the West, starring Carolyn Aaron, Mary Lou Henner, Melanie Mayron, and Jo Beth Williams. It's sold out. It's running at the Odyssey Theater to sold out audiences, and it's going to be moving, I hear, to off-Broadway in a couple months. Sandra, tell us everything. Sandra!
Oh, okay. First, it's extending through July 16th here in LA, so people can still come. And yes, we will go to New York after the forest fire air clears and all that kind of stuff. So, but it's been really fun to do sort of live theater here in LA and see people who are hungry to come out. My statistic is 60% of the people who buy theater tickets are women 50 and older, if there are any of you out there. So it's nice to occasionally have a play that has women over 50 in it, in a comedy. That's all I will say. So,
and this is the first time in a long time you are the playwright. You're not actually on stage. How has that been for you?
Fantastic. Oh my, I love it. And these actors are so fantastic and great. And you have to see the, marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Caroline Aaron, Mary Lou Henner, unbelievable. I won't say what she does. Melanie Mayron from 30 something. And actually Jo Beth Williams is doing a film in Malta. So, actually we have the wonderful Eve Gordon stepping in for her this weekend. So we're really excited. So thank you.
Oh, so wonderful. Can't wait. Can't wait to see it again. Yay!
Shall we go forth into our fantastic show today?
Yes, let us go forth and conquer. We have a friend of yours first up. Do tell.
Yes, and I will tell in a moment. So we flipped the format this show because I've been doing that. So I'm going to do the intros, and then you will do the interviews. And so just to set that up. That said, I usually write 30-second downloads, and this was really one of the more fun ones for me that I've written, because Mona Simpson, we're so honored to have her. And yes, she's been a longtime friend, but she really is, as I like to say, let me try this on you. Mona Simpson, and I hope that I get most of it right. Mona Simpson is an icon of the American literati. Whose cultural footprint cannot be easily contained in a conventional bio. After undergraduate work in poetry at Berkeley, she attended Columbia's MFA program, then working as an editor at the Paris Review while finishing her acclaimed first novel, Anywhere But Here, which was made into a fantastic movie, we all remember, starring Susan Sarandon and Natalie Portman. That was followed by The Lost Father, a regular guy, one of whose characters is thought to be loosely based on Simpson's sibling, the late Steve Jobs, founder of Apple Computer, Off Keck Road, My Hollywood, and Casebook. Mona Simpson's short stories and essays have appeared in The New Yorker, The Atlantic Monthly, Plowshares, so many others. Her awards include, are not limited to, a Whiting Prize, a Guggenheim, NEA grant, Penn Faulkner finalist, and a literature award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. She's taught for 25 years at UCLA. Here's the sentence, like, Mona Simpson is likely the only Paris Review publisher whose namesake character in The Simpsons, I have to say that again, you have to diagram it. She's likely the only Paris Review publisher whose namesake character in The Simpsons was voiced by Glenn Close. Her extraordinary new novel is Commitment, and we're so thrilled to have her. Welcome, Mona, and I'm taking myself off video, so you can.
Well, don't go so fast. You don't have to, Mona. Thank you for joining us. It's really an honor.
I can't wait to see the play.
You will. Okay, so I'm going to take myself off so you could go to the book. Okay, I'll watch from.
Okay, but first, we'll get to Commitment in a minute. But Mona, I have to tell you, because I've never told you this, Anywhere But Here was a revelation to me when I read it all of those years ago. I have to tell you, it was almost uncomfortably familiar, the dynamic between the mother, Adele, and the daughter, Anne. And I just wondered, have you heard that a lot over the years, that you struck a chord?
Well, I think sometimes there is something to that mother-daughter relationship. I mean, I think it's become interesting now that we're all mothers too. We probably relate differently in reading the book. You know?
I think so. And now that you're a mother of 2 grown children, it probably seems different to you even now, having.
For sure. I mean, it's funny that people relate to different characters in a novel depending on when they read it. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I was going to say also, Commitment is the story again of a family with an impaired mother at the center. For those of you who haven't read it, it is an amazingly engrossing, sprawling tale of the lives of 3 siblings, Walter, Lena, and Donnie, whose single mother has a nervous breakdown, and then they're forced to navigate the world in that chaos. Excuse me. I'm curious, Mona, what began the book for you? You said earlier in an interview years ago that Anywhere But Here began with an image for you of a mother driving down a highway. What began Commitment?
I think two sort of, this was a book I worked on for a number of years. So I think I sort of had 2 different entries, so to speak. The first one was, I was thinking of a young man in college who, in a way, he's in a dorm where he has a similar room to 100 other kids in the same dorm. He's eating in the same cafeteria with all these other kids, but whose life and experience is quite different because he's actually thinking about his family back home and worrying about his mother and how the family is managing without him. Yeah. So that was one thread of this piece I was working on. And then at one point while working on the book, I read an extraordinary essay by the late neurologist, Dr. Oliver Sacks, which was called The Lost Virtues of the Asylum. And it was about the history of public mental health hospitals and the deinstitutionalization. And it was sort of contrary to the popular opinion of these places as horrible snake pits which abused patients. And instead, excuse me, Copperfield.
That's the best part about live Zoom. We get to see.
I know, you get to meet the guys in the family. Copperfield. Anyway, it was basically a very sort of counterculture essay in that it presented these asylums as places where a number of people had actually found a better, safer, albeit smaller life for themselves, but a life that actually was meaningful and much more safe than other alternatives when they were very ill. And he used memoirs of people who've been in these hospitals. He traced the history of the philosophy of moral treatment, which started in Europe in the late part of the 19th century, and sort of inspired these big hospitals to be built in America, which many of them were built with great idealistic aspirations. They had a lot of land. They had working farms with the patients working outside in the gardens and milking the cows and working in the cafeteria. They were sort of almost like, you could imagine, sort of like small villages, and the doctors and the nurses in some cases would live on campus.
That's incredible to me.
Yeah, it's kind of an incredible thing, especially when we look at the fact that now more mentally ill people are actually in jail than they are in anywhere that
Yeah.
would give them gentler or kinder treatment.
Yeah, it was really kind of a revelation too, to discover the work of this Quaker psychiatrist who did believe that this airy, well-lit hospital environment could have a positive impact on patients. It was interesting to me. The mother Diane is central to the work, but she's off stage.
She's off stage for most of it. A lot of it is concerned with sort of how these three children come
Yes.
to. So she's kind of there, but not there. She's kind of a ghostly presence in a way for them.
Where did she come from? Is she? I asked this because
She
I
came
know.
from California. I saw her coming from the Central Valley, from a small town in the Central Valley. And that's where she came from.
It's interesting because
Family, I could see her as one of the first people in her family to go to college. I see her as a striver who worked and worked and worked and finally just kind of collapsed a bit.
well, that striving is central to the kids as well. They're striving in this environment of chaos, right? After their mother does have her breakdown. But then one of my favorite characters in the book is Julie, the friend who steps in. And she and several other angels work as scaffolding around these kids who go on to some great success. Some of them, Donnie in particular, have rougher rides, but they all achieve some success. I wondered if you could talk about the character Julie and where she comes from and what you were hoping to do with that relationship.
I really wanted to write about, so much is made of the love relationship in fiction, and so much is made of the family in fiction. But I feel like not enough is really, there hasn't been enough exploration and valorization, I suppose you'd say, of friendship as one of the really significant, profound, and salvational aspects of adult life, really.
Yeah.
And in her case, I think she and Diane had a probably a little bit of an unbalanced friendship. I think that Diane was kind of the life and the spark and
The dynamic, manic friend, right?
vibrant friend who was perhaps a little less organized, a little less responsible, but a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And they had that friendship. Julie was a single woman. They're both nurses. They worked together.
Right.
And so when her friend has this big trouble, Julie steps in really just because of course, what will you do if a close friend of yours has a terrible, but she hasn't had kids herself. So she's sort of learning all this as she goes along, but she steps into this house, and Diane had, in addition to her own kids who lived in the house with her, she also had taken in a boarder to help with the rent.
Right.
So the boarder doesn't feel comfortable being in charge of the kids and wants Julie to be there pretty much every night. So she really steps in and watches over them, chipping in financially while also figuring out her friend's health insurance and everything. And eventually has the two who are left after the one goes to college move in with her in her apartment and her cats. And it changes her life in a big way. But it also gave her, I think it was a meaningful thing for her too. I mean, she had this sort of romantic friendship that turned into as so many romances do, into a full-time, demanding, profound job.
I was just going to say that sounds a lot like my marriage, but that's another conversation. Another thread that I really loved in this work was the role of art in people's lives. I mean, each one of these siblings has some connection to an artistic sensibility, and also the question, can we justify art if we are struggling, right, just to make ends meet? I'm coming from a working class background myself. That spoke to me loudly in the book, and I was wondering if you could talk about that idea and where that
Absolutely.
work.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think for Walter and for Lena, his sister as well, Walter goes to college and just discovers an absolute passion for architecture, for designs. He finds when he looks at a blueprint, he can just immediately picture the building. It's,
Right.
the code that architects use, it just absolutely speaks to him intuitively, and he loves it. And then but he also really has a need for money because he needs to help his family at first stay in the house they're renting, and then he's just needs money to help them, period, his sister go to college, and et cetera. But he then becomes interested when he visits the hospital and meets this doctor who explains sort of the history of these hospitals and how they were designed and built and what the dreams were in America. He then thinks about institutional architecture and wonders whether that can't be something meaningful. Of course, he goes to his fancy Berkeley professor who says that, well, we don't do that here,
Right.
we don't design prisons and maybe museums, but not prisons or hospitals.
Right.
Any of that.
Yeah.
And Lena too wants to be an artist, and it takes an enormous amount of courage, as you know firsthand, Samantha, for somebody from a working class background to first of all, to even just follow that. We all know that the American dream depends on getting higher education. Yeah. The statistics are all there, and yet it's very hard, as Lena sees when she gets a full-time job right out of high school, because it's very intoxicating to get a salary after you grew up in a household where money is very scarce. Sure. That in itself is a kind of thorough intoxication, because you feel like an adult, you feel like I can spend, I can live. But not only to pursue an education, which Lena eventually does, but she also she wants to be an artist, which is in a way the most reckless thing. I mean, as a teacher of writing at UCLA, I've had numerous parents who've taken me by the collar at graduation and said, you were my child's mentor, but can she get a job? Her sister is going to, Harvard Medical School or Harvard Dental School, but can she get a job? Can she publish? Can you promise me this will work out? And of course, we cannot promise that it'll work out, at least in any discernible financial sense. But yet there are great hazards to the other way of life too, to a more secure, stable job. We all have lived through our 30s when we knew a lot of very, very unhappy lawyers.
Exactly. Who often end up taking writing classes, by the way,
yes.
which
That's funny.
I've just got to ask you this. Martin Amis once, R.I.P. Martin Amis, he once famously said that you are always reading the autobiography of a writer's mind. And I know that it is dangerous territory to project anything about a writer's life into their fiction, certainly. But that said, didn't you work in an ice cream shop like the character Lena?
I did indeed.
You went to Berkeley like Walter?
I went to Berkeley like Walter. I worked in an ice cream store like Lena, for sure. I've sprinkled little bits of my
yeah.
Graduate school at Columbia, so I've gotten, if I happen to have experience that's useful, I'll use it. Of course, if I don't, then I'll just resort to research.
That was my question. Like, where is that line for you? Do you begin with what was and then say what if, or how does that work?
Well, I mean, in this book, for example, I really lacked hospital experience, mental health hospital experience, and
because
I
your
didn't.
mother never saw it, right? I mean, she never. Your own mother never saw that. That wasn't it.
No, yeah. That wasn't in my own mother's life. So I spent a lot of time. Actually, the closest state mental health hospital to me in Santa Monica was Metropolitan Hospital in Norwalk, and I spent a lot of time there. I spent a lot of time in the facilities. I spent a lot of time talking to doctors and nurses. I tried to find people who'd worked there in the 70s. And it was really pretty fascinating. I became close to 3 nurses who are now retired, who worked there almost their entire working lives, and who are now volunteering their time to put together the archives, which is a Herculean job. I mean, when you see these stacks and piles of files, I mean, if they do it every day, they won't finish it in the rest of their life. But they were moved to do that, which is it says something in itself.
It's
they had
incredible.
so many stories of patients. You know.
Speaking of so many stories, I mean, this book is layered and complex and goes across time, and took you 6 years to write, correct?
You know, I said 6 years. I think it actually was 9.
Okay.
I thought it was, and then I actually checked, and it was actually 9. Now there was COVID, and it slowed things down a bit because my editor's a bit older and doesn't do well with computer files. So COVID was hard because she didn't have her assistant with her. But it was a long time.
Well, so how do you know when you're done? This is also a personal question and a professional question for the, as an interviewer here for an audience.
For something you're working on. No.
Yeah, I've been working on something for a very, very long time. How do you know when you're done, Mona? I mean, how did this book, when did you know, okay, this story of this family is complete?
Well, there is definitely a quote that says that books are never finished. They're just abandoned. I don't feel quite like that. I do feel a sense of, I don't know, when I feel the ending has brought me somewhere, I think that's something. And then also I've heard someone say this, and this is not an original thought, but I know it's true for me. When I start, I love to, I'm endlessly fiddling with the galleys and making little changes. And when I start making, you're never going to make everything better every time. You're going to make a few things worse. But when the ratio becomes you're generally making things worse than better, it's time to stop.
It's time to stop. Someone needs to step away from the manuscript, ma'am. Just step away. One final question for you, because you brought up friendship. You mentioned our beloved Michelle Hunovan, the novelist in Altadena, who's been a friend of this program. You mentioned her in your acknowledgments in the novel. I noticed. Do you share pages? What do you do when you're in process? Do you have friends you share pages with?
Often, funny, she just sent me some pages last night, which I read right away. They're wonderful, not surprisingly. And no, we often trade pages. With this particular book and her most recent book, Search, which is a magical book about a search committee. Who would think that there could be a hilarious and magical book about a search committee? But she's written one. And with this book and with Search, we actually, I read Commitment and she read Search out loud. We took sort of a few days and we just read the whole books all the way through out loud to each other. It was a great experience.
Amazing. She read your book and you read her book, so you could each hear how it was playing on the page.
It was wonderful.
I want to be in that circle. Anyway, listen, Mona, thank you so much. It has been an honor.
It's delightful to be on this show. And thank you, Sandra. And I can't wait to come see the play.
Oh, well, yeah. I will read my play out loud to you. No, it's like that was a fantastic interview, the romantic friendship, and that now that the book is getting worse, then you like. But the notion of you guys sitting and reading your books, that is mind-blowing.
It was wonderful.
I love that.
We'll do it again this time around.
Yeah.
Well, please come back and see us again. We'll be here.
Yes, thank you.
Sandra, I want to hear about your daughters and all, but we'll find another time.
Yes, we will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Wow, what an extraordinary, that was so fun. That was so fun to listen to. Write it.
You know that I love Anywhere But Here. You know that was one of my big books.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, those mothers, those can't get over the mothers.
That's another story, honey. I'll tell you later.
Next, anyway. I will do the 30-second download for for our next guest. I was
Yes.
thinking of the term mother tree,
The
which
mother,
may or may like mother trees, mother trees. That's the connection, mothers and trees, I think today.
I have to tell you before you get started on the intro for Peter, that he and I, you're going to see a part of a recorded interview that I did with him, but he and I were talking about this olive tree that I have in my yard that I'm madly in love with, that makes me feel so wonderful. And after reading The Hidden Life of Trees, I understood why maybe I love that tree so much. But anyway, go ahead. Tell us.
It makes you look at the whole world differently. Okay, here's the 30-second download for Peter Wohlleben. Okay, and Wohlleben I think means good living or well living. Okay, in German, which is my unnative German. Okay. Peter Wohlleben is a German forester. That's the kind of sentence we love on Bookish. An author of 16 nonfiction books, including The Inner Life of Animals and The Secret Network of Nature. In 2016, his bestseller, The Hidden Life of Trees, sold 3 million copies and inspired a documentary of the same name, changing the way we looked at ourselves and our environment by suggesting that trees can communicate with each other, even take care of each other. Now, after 8 years, he follows up his groundbreaking work with The Power of Trees, How Ancient Forests Can Save Us If We Let Them. Here, Wohlleben delves even further into the life of trees, describing how they pass knowledge. This is so mind-blowing.
I know.
How they pass knowledge to succeeding generations while also discussing their ability to survive climate change. It's
Right.
such an interesting book. The Power of Trees is a love letter to the forest and a passionate argument for protecting nature's boundless diversity, not only for the trees, but also for us.
Yes.
I turn it to you for your interview with him from Germany.
And it is, yes, it is a record, and you're off to the theater, so get out of here. Thank you. Julie, roll tape, please. So in California, of course, we are one of the breadbaskets of this nation, and it's a hugely agricultural state. And one of the main arteries of the state is the I-5 North that takes you through the farming valley. And you see all of these orchards, right? Pecan, almond, you name it, going through, going up north to California on this route, and they look like soldiers at attention, right? And the research about that was so interesting. Can you talk a little bit about the way that these farmed orchards are maybe different than the wild?
Yeah, to be honest, it's a little bit like battery farming. To plant trees in a row, just one species of trees. That's not how nature would organize forests. Although trees live in something like family bands, so they like to be amongst each other. Nature does it different, because nature always mixes tree species, because if this whole ecosystem get damaged by let's say by one tree species become sick or infested by bark beetles or whatsoever, and they die locally, that doesn't mean a big damage for the whole ecosystem, because there are many tree species, and there's always one species which will repair this wound in the ecosystem. But if you have just a single tree species on big areas, it's like a cornfield, or like every monoculture. It's very easy for insects, for fungi, for bacteria to infest this plantation. So it's very unnatural, and the trees are even aged, which is also uncommon in nature, because there we have mother trees, we have offspring. It's a mixture.
It is so interesting to me. Thank you for that. It's so interesting to me that our awareness of trees seems to be at a particular high point right now. I'm thinking of your work, certainly The Hidden Life of Trees, but also a very famous novel, Richard Powers' The Overstory, captured people's imagination. There have been several other big books. What do you think it is with our need to understand, or perhaps our new appreciation for what's going on around us in the forests and the trees?
Yeah, it's something, it sounds a little bit like if we want to escape everyday life into a wonder world, which in reality doesn't exist, but it's the other way around. We want to go back to our roots, because we could become Homo sapiens because we started, or our ancestors started to cook their meals, and therefore we got more calories to have bigger brains. And in our genes, there is still the ability to withstand more campfire smoke, for example, much more than other Homo species. Homo sapiens has special abilities fixed in the genes. And what we also know, that we interact when we are out in the forest. That's so-called forest bathing nowadays. But we know, for example, that our blood pressure sinks if we breathe in tree communication, for example. And that led, for example, the German University of Munich to train forest bathing trainers, because we know that has a good health impact. And where's the connection? The connection is that we have to have a sense for a good environment, good ecosystems to be in, to live in. And I think our ancestors needed to judge whether a forest is good or bad. So nowadays we translate it into well-being. We think, here it's nice, I love this place, and that where we instinctively know this is a good forest. So we have a direct physical connection to trees, and nowadays we think, it's something wishful thinking, and it's like dreaming. No, that is our ecosystem where we belong, and we still have senses to judge whether it's in a good state or not. So we have a connection, and that has nothing to do with being romantic, although it's okay to have emotional feelings about that.
To be in love with my olive tree, as I was talking about earlier.
For example. Yeah, it's okay to connect. So it doesn't mean that we now speak tree language, but it's an uncertain feeling that there is more than just a plant which is fixed carbon and which makes photosynthesis and producing sugar or olives. No, and there is an interaction. For example, if you have trees in your house, we know that some people say, if I speak to plants, there is a reaction. We don't know. I don't think that plants can understand what you're talking about. But we know that plants are able to hear, that they have senses. For example, they can hear insects or other animals which are chewing when they feed on plants. They can hear the chewing sound, and then they react, for example, by producing defending chemicals in their leaves. So they are able to hear. And what we know, if the environment is too noisy, if it is too loud, they can't prepare in advance because they can't hear those chewing sounds in the neighborhood. So it's about communication, it's about sound, it's about many, many things. And I think we are on the very first step to understand what's going on.
So fascinating. I think about the trees here in California that are planted near the, they're near the freeways and near traffic roads. They're doing work of cleaning the air, but they're also bombarded with all that sound now. You're changing the way I even view these trees here.
It's a very recent research from American scientists who found out on a certain plant which is able to hear the approaching bees or other insects, pollinator insects, and then this plant, I don't know the English name for it, sweetens its nectar instantly and answering with the shaking of the blossoms. So that's incredible. That's
fascinating.
it's
incredible to me.
And those researchers, they said they would appreciate more research on how our civilization sounds are disturbing those interactions.
It's amazing. Can I ask you a more personal question?
Yeah.
when did this topic start to seize your imagination? And because it's clearly central to your being.
Yeah, it's since I was a child, I was always fascinated about what's going on in nature. Mostly it started with animals, of course, but with different animals, not typical pets, for example, spiders or water turtles or a chicken that I hatched on a heating pillow of my grandma. And because I read that if you talk to the egg, then the hatching chicken regards you as its mother, and that it worked. It worked. Really, really difficult, but it worked. And yeah, I did always things like that. And after school, I thought, okay, what should be a good job for me? And I thought, okay, a forester is something like a tree keeper, something like an Ent, like a Lord of the Rings. And but afterwards, it turned out that a forester is a little bit more like a tree butcher. And then I changed the way of treating those forests by protecting them more and trying to find out what's going on. And we have, meanwhile, tons of scientific studies concerning things like that. And every day we get news from science about wonderful things. And more it turned out that plants are different of animals, of course, but they have their own behavior, they have their own strategies, and just because they are fixed to the underground, that doesn't mean that they have no senses. It's just the other way around. Because they are not able to move, they have to have much more senses than we have, and much more strategies for defending and for reactions, because they are not able to move. Our main reaction is, for example, concerning dangers, we walk away. And trees, they have to stay, and therefore they have to know, is there a deer approaching? Is there an insect? Is it a fungi which tries to infest me? Or is it is it a drought? Is it getting drier in the environment? And so trees, they have to have so many different reactions, and therefore they have to know what's going around. And so they are able to feel, they are able to hear, they are able to taste, to smell, to whatsoever.
It's just fascinating to me, and it makes some weird intuitive sense, because you do feel it when you walk through a forest. You do. Yeah. When you're surrounded by trees, you feel something different, and all of this research that you so wonderfully talk about in The Hidden Life of Trees is just illuminating. May I ask one thing? If we can change one behavior about how we treat trees, what would you say we do? Because it does seem to be there's a call at the heart of your work to change our relationship.
First, it's okay to use timber. You showed the book, and that's paper, that's shredded tree bone.
Right, right.
Yeah, sorry.
That did cross my mind as I was holding it.
Yeah, and but we should appreciate it more. And it's like on animal keeping. It's a difference between environmentally friendly animal keeping and battery farming. And that's exactly what we should do with trees. We should respect their way of life. We should have more protected forests where trees can live their wildlife. And we should consider more if we really need more paper for advertising, for example, or for just printing an email and then throw it away, or the burning of timber. It's most timber in Germany. I don't know how it is in the United States or in Canada. Most timber used in Germany is used for burning in private homes or in power plants, and it's increasing heavily, and we should stop that, because therefore we have modern technologies like heat pumps. And what's also the biggest forest destroyer and biggest danger for trees, that's the meat consumption, which we should reduce. It's okay to eat meat, but the amounts we use nowadays are responsible for 80% of the forest destruction, and
80%.
80%.
Let's pause for a moment and consider the implications. 80% because of our desire for hamburger. Yeah.
80%. And if we see the benefits which tree gives us, and they don't give them for us, they do it for their own purposes. They don't, if we can see, trees hate hot days, trees hate dry days. And what they can do, trees can create their own low depression areas, trees can create their own rain clouds, and they can let it rain. If we let big forest ecosystems work, not just a single tree, of course, but big forest, intact forest can create rain clouds. We see the big wildfires nowadays in Canada, and of course, that's also because of climate change, but even more because of forestry, because we have young forests, we have big clear cuts, and those forest ecosystems are not longer able to organize themselves properly. And trees can all do all this, and it's not just about timber. Nowadays, when we think about benefits, we think forests are carbon sinks and forests are sources of timber. But more, they are sources of water. They are sources of cooling the local atmosphere down to in degrees Celsius. It's about 10 to 15 degrees in average in summer times. June, July, August, and on this month. Forests can cool down the local atmosphere in average around about 10 to 15 degrees Celsius, and that's a lot. That's exactly what we fear about climate change. It's that it's getting warmer, and that it's getting drier. And trees hate this too, and they react if we let them.
So trees could be our savior if we only let them. It's really
just in parts, because if we continue to emit greenhouse gases in a way we do it nowadays, from a certain point on, that's too much even for intact forest ecosystems. But till now, so far, they are able to do this job. And if we reduce massively the emission of CO2 and methane and whatsoever, and in the same time let forests become older. For example, 1% of the oldest trees, and that's worldwide, contains 50% of the carbon stored in the forest ecosystem. So we need old trees, very old trees. And that's exactly what's done nowadays in your region. Old trees are cut down. In Germany, we don't have old trees left. Any old trees left, just a very few in some parks, but not in the forest. And out in the forest, there are just young trees. So we have to let trees become older.
What gives you hope? This is my last question for you, Peter, because you write so movingly about this topic, and as a reader, I feel so invested in this topic. So what gives you hope in this scenario?
My hope is that more and more people get aware how important trees and forest ecosystems are. And we don't need that the majority of people supports it, but we need a critical mass, and that critical mass will be, I think, 10 or 20% of the people who want to have a change. That's enough to start the change. And I think the other point is that trees are still able to do the job. And I love to look into cities where trees are able to grow, on rooftops and in train stations and wheresoever that are the worst places for trees, and they are still able to grow there. So they are still able to grow out in the forest and even on clear cuts. So trees are able to reorganize forest ecosystems and to heal those big wounds out in the landscape. So this altogether convinces me that I think within the next 5 years, we will have a green tipping point, a green forest and tree tipping point. Although we have also this bad tipping points concerning the polar ice and whatsoever, we will also see a green tipping point. And my hope is that it's not too late. I'm convinced that it's not too late to change it back.
Well, I'm inspired, and I seriously mean that. Thank you so much. Guys, everybody, read this, absorb it, and then change your ways, people. Change your ways. Peter, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right.
It was a big pleasure, and thumb up. Let's make trees the job. They are very good in this.
Trees are cool. That I hope you were as inspired as I was. I just loved talking to him. He had to get up in the middle of the night practically to talk to us. Listen, thanks everybody. That's the end of our interviews for today, but not the end of the show. Hang on just a second. I need to thank Sandra and Peter and of course Mona for joining us today. And also thanks to our production manager, Julie Corlett. As always, don't forget copies of Peter and Mona's books are available at Once Upon a Time bookstore. If you've got thoughts for today, or if you have suggestions or just anything at all, please email us at events@scng.com. And I'm going to leave us with a word from my colleague, the wonderful books editor, Eric Peterson, on the great books coverage we have coming up in our newspapers and his wonderful Book Pages newsletter that if you don't subscribe to, you should. So Eric, take it away, please. There we go. There he is.
Hey, thanks guys. Thanks for having me on. I'm going to close out the show here. This weekend in the print product, as we call it, the newspaper, we've got 12 mysteries that you must read. It's a must. And I wrote it, and it's got some great stuff in there, people that you are going to be really happy that you read. We've also got a piece on George Lopez, the comedian. He's got a new book. And also coming, we've got, you'll see it today, an interview with Ann Leckie, who is a wonderful science fiction writer. She has a new book called Translation State, and we talk about fantasy and science fiction and building a universe and AI and what she thinks about it. It's really great. That'll be in the book pages. It'll also be coming up in the print product as well. I will stop there, but we've got great stuff coming. We've got graphic novels. We've got some YA books. We've got some thrillers coming. Please don't miss the coverage either in the paper or in the book pages. So please subscribe. It's free to the book pages, and you'll get all of this coming your way. Thanks very much, and thanks for watching the show. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.